This lecture is on 9/11, the conspiracy that was, now is not, and will not be again. Okay, so the 9/11 conspiracy rehashed. Everybody knows what happened on September 11th, 2001. Okay, 9/11. Most people forget that there was 3 buildings that collapsed. Everybody, of course, remembers the Twin Towers, the symbol of American capitalism and prosperity, and the Big Apple, America's greatest city, the city that never sleeps. But most people forget about the other building, the 3rd building, that collapsed next to it. It was a much smaller building, the FBI building. Had a lot more questionable things about it because of the documents that were potentially inside of it. But that aside, that part of the conspiracy aside, the 3rd building, we who were watching at the time, probably got sent home from school, or maybe you're watching internationally, we all heard the firemen say, "We're going to pull the building." Definitely jumped into my mind, like, hey, do they have some sort of explosive devices implanted inside each of the building as like a failsafe that, like, I don't know, apparently we never heard about? Because in my education growing up, part of what we watched in schools, we do videos, is we would watch how they collapse a building, how a building falls in on itself, and it's this process. They lay all the dynamite on each of the poles. I mean, I just watched a movie on it in school, 2 years before that. So it automatically made us think, well, do they have these devices planted on the buildings as a failsafe? Who knows? Okay, who knows? Meaning, who knows what that guy was talking about when he said toilet? Could have been referring to anything. It could have been explosives on the building, or maybe not. But what we do know is those were some huge planes. They hit the building with extreme force, and there was fuel, JT5 fuel, jet fuel, on top of it in the building, and it burned. It caused a lot of damage, and we all saw the buildings collapse. And it was a bad day. A lot of people died. We don't know what the guy was talking about when he said toilet. He could have been talking about anything. The fact that there was explosives laid, somebody would have probably seen it beforehand who lived and would have lived to talk about it. Something like that had happened. It is curious that the insurance for the building did change hands a few days before, like within the week before, or maybe ownership changed hands and insurance changed hands. Now let me be clear. You're not talking to somebody who's just writing it off. You're just talking to somebody whose perspective has changed a lot. Okay. Now we know that insurance changed hands, but I have to be realistic here, and the fact that I have to reflect on my own experiences and points in my life where major things have happened a short time before a certain event. So say maybe I didn't do something, like maybe typically when I rented a car, I never purchased the additional insurance. Well, one time I did, and wouldn't you know that it was the only time I've ever been hit that happened by an uninsured driver. And if I hadn't purchased that insurance, which is something I never do, it wouldn't have been as easy for me to recover from as it was in the case that this happened and I had the insurance. So that's just one small example. But I'm sure you out there's been times in your life where for some reason you did something a little bit different and you don't know why you did it, but you just had this feeling. And when you had that feeling, you responded to it and it covered you on the backside. I know that you guys understand what I'm saying. And so the fact that the insurance changed hands before 9/11 could have just been God saving someone's behind before something really bad happened. Okay, that this is the sort of phenomenon, the metaphysical realities that we live with every day of our lives. So one thing is for sure, okay, this event, it changed America forever. Okay, it introduced TSA, it introduced the tariff levels, and every day we were hit with terror level red, etc. But one thing is for sure is it changed America forever in some bad ways, more or less. But it definitely we were all changed. Okay, so moving on. Maybe it was Al Qaeda, which is of course a play on Al Qaeda, right? Al Qaeda was set up by the CIA in like the 60s or 70s, I think the 60s, as a way to overthrow the dictator at that time. And we overthrew it and we installed Saddam Hussein. One thing that we forget as American is we're talking about a different religious group. We're talking about Eastern society versus Western society. So just because somebody says that they're going to do the right thing, wouldn't you? If somebody says, look, I'm going to give you $1 million if you promise to pay me 10% interest, but I'm not going to be able to really enforce it. I'm just going to basically trust you to pay. Well, like a lot of criminals are going to say, yeah, of course, I'll do that. And of course, I'll give you the money, and then they never do. Things like that. So just because we set up these dictators and we expect them to play nice, and maybe we give them loans and attach requirements to them, doesn't mean that they're going to actually do that. Maybe it was Al CIA. Maybe it was. Maybe it was a U.S. government black flag with Al Qaeda. Okay? Maybe it was. Maybe it was meant to start a war and to give the U.S. a reason to go to war, like the Gulf of Tonkin, which we're not going to get into. Communism is bad. It's worth fighting. Maybe it was meant to acquire oil. You guys saw OPEC, okay? Iraq has the second largest producing oil field in the world. Maybe, and the Bush family, as we know, was into oil. So maybe it was to go after the oil. Maybe. And maybe it was meant to disrupt culture. The United States culture shifted dramatically after 9/11. Over time, we ended up losing tons of record labels, tons of music. All of, culture just changed. All of our best minds are now focused and fighting in this war, and there's a lot of gaps back home, and a lot of foreign cultures and influence from Islam came into the United States during this time. Maybe that's what it was meant to do, disrupt culture. But maybe it's time to grow up. Okay? Maybe all of those things we just talked about are circumstantial occurrences of necessity. Okay? Meaning that they are the byproducts of a central fact that had to happen, central occurrence. Okay? Let's back up a bit. All right? And now, in 1991, we had a Desert Storm.
Just 2 hours ago, Allied air forces began an attack on military targets in Iraq and Kuwait. These attacks continue as I speak. Ground forces are not engaged. This conflict started August 2nd when the dictator of Iraq invaded a small and helpless neighbor. Kuwait, a member of the Arab League and a member of the United Nations, was crushed. Its people brutalized. 5 months ago, Saddam Hussein started this cruel war against Kuwait. Tonight, the battle has been joined.
On the 16th of January 1991, the multinational forces of the Gulf Coalition unleashed a massive night air assault on Iraqi forces in both Iraq and Kuwait. The attacks caught the Iraqis by surprise, and Allied aircraft soon roamed at will in the skies over Iraq. This video ordnance program examines the first month of the Desert Storm air campaign, from the air raids over Baghdad to the Scud missile attacks on Saudi Arabia and Israel.
I do remember in 1998 watching on TV as cruise missiles were fired into Iraq. Okay? Missiles fired United States and United Kingdom, our ally, struck Baghdad. Okay? They didn't let our, as part of the conditions probably from Desert Storm, we were supposed to have oversight over their weapons development. They want the nuke. Okay? During the Cold War and World War II, countries were in a hurry. We had the arms race. Countries were in a hurry to get the nuclear bomb because if a belligerent country like Germany, Italy, was to use the nuclear bomb, Japan, to strike one of the other countries like Korea, the good Korea, they would want to shoot their missiles back. Okay? So everybody was in a rush to acquire the nuclear bomb. Some countries achieved that purpose, that end. A lot of countries did, and a lot didn't. By the way, we were supposed to disarm nuclear bombs by now already. Hasn't happened yet, and we see the reverse happening. Okay, why does anybody talk about this in these prior agreements? Nonetheless, we watched bombs fly into Baghdad.
Good evening. Earlier today, I ordered America's armed forces to strike military and security targets in Iraq. They are joined by British forces. Their mission is to attack Iraq's nuclear, chemical, and biological weapons programs and its military capacity to threaten its neighbors. Their purpose is to protect the national interest of the United States and indeed the interests of people throughout the Middle East and around the world. Saddam Hussein must not be allowed to threaten us.
There's just been a second flash and then a second boom from what appears to have been another cruise missile impact just on the other side of that apartment building over there. And as far as we know, that is the site of a security force headquarters, the sort of place that is certainly very high on the target list of these Allied air attacks against Baghdad. As the booming explosions sounded across the city, the Iraqi anti-aircraft fire was intense but apparently ineffective. Once again, the gunners tried to follow the missiles by sound, blasting sharp bursts of fire into the night whenever they heard engine noise. But the missiles kept coming, and one impact knocked our cameraman off his feet. This was a spectacular display of precision firepower near the heart of a heavily populated city.
Something certainly has to be done. Saddam is not a problem that's going to go away on his own. He just keeps lying, keeps breaking promises.
We are Israeli citizens. In 1991, we suffered from the war from Iraq. Our houses were destroyed, totally destroyed. Kids were injured, a lot of people were injured. A lot of damage was done, so I'm not going to I think it's good at what the Americans are doing right now, and I don't think they should stop. They should teach them a lesson.
I hope this will be the last time. Enough game playing, so to speak.
Again, they wouldn't let our inspection teams in, and that was part of the agreement, and we wanted to know if they had WMD, weapons of mass destruction, biological, chemical, whatever. Okay? Now, just focusing on this strike in Baghdad. Now, I don't know about you, but if it was me and I was sitting in Baghdad and my enemy, who I know is my enemy, not like the United States where we have so much culture going on, it's a lot less culture over there and you're really focusing on who hurts who did what to who. You're kind of hanging out, maybe you hang out, maybe you're a goat herder, you shoot AK-47s up into the sky at night for fun. That's what you do. But I'm not going to get any more crude than that. I could go pretty dark on this. But I don't know about you, but if my enemy fired missiles into my country in the middle of the night and I couldn't really do much about it, I would want to strike back, whether I was in the military or civilian. Okay? And this is all I'm pointing out. That was 1998. And then a few years later, 2001 happens, they hijack a plane and run it into our building. This isn't the first time a plane's been hijacked. There is precedent. It may have been the first time something so drastic had happened in our lifetimes as millennials, but it wasn't the first time that a plane had been captured with people in it by a terrorist organization or just terrorists in general or criminals or whatever. So there's movies about it in the 90s. Lots of movies. Maybe Con Air had come out. I don't know. Maybe Air Force One had come out. I don't know. There's been a lot of precedent, especially like, Speed, somebody, plants a bomb on a bus. This concept of a plane being taken over by an enemy is not new. We had, there's almost every movie of the 90s that was good had something to do like that. So it's not unheard of that it would have happened, that this idea could have been planted and maybe opposing enemy special forces or whatever. So not only that, we've had, if you're coming from Islam, you live in the Middle East, there's a long history of opposition. We have a really long history of opposition of Islam. Christianity and Islam do not get together. Okay, ever since Islam was formed in the late first millennia, we've had an opposition with Islam. Okay, we don't get along. They want to kill us. We don't believe in their God. We've killed them. We've slaughtered Jews. Christians have killed Jews. We've crucified them. We've crucified Muslims and Jews together side by side. We've had the Crusades. We had Spanish Inquisition. We've had so many things. Islam and Christianity, Judaism do not get along. So, not only that, the Ottoman Empire. The Ottoman Empire was this big empire, and Hitler sought to resurrect it and joined with Mussolini and Hitler. We're going to be the world power and conquer the world. But so all of the former Ottoman Empire was restored, and the Ottoman Empire was all Arab, it was all Muslim, and the Ottoman Empire was restored and rose up, and every single Muslim country joined the axis of evil. Okay, we're enemies. Okay, so fast forward, 60 years later, the U.S. strikes Iraq. They're not playing nice, and then you're going to want to hit back. Somebody hits you. This is how warfare goes. I hit you, you hit me. All right, so we shouldn't be surprised. Also, maybe Saddam Hussein was a bad guy. Maybe he needs to be eradicated. Maybe he's setting up these giant idols of himself, mistreating the population. Women have no rights. He has a strong, firm control. He's a dictator. So not only did they attack us, but Saddam Hussein himself needed eradication. They declared jihad on them, and we declared war in response. 9/11 in the PTSD generation. PTSD was invented as a term during this generation. Post-traumatic stress syndrome. Now, 9/11 definitely disturbed young minds. We watched people fall to their deaths willingly from a tower, throwing themselves out, and watch them fall in seemingly slow motion and descend. And it was horrible. It was very disturbing as young people to witness something like that. So this definitely gave the millennials PTSD. Then we go and we fight the war itself. We do it for all the right reasons. Moreover, this led to confusion and uncertainty, uncertain times. We're immediately getting inundated with, terror watch lists, terror alerts. And we're kind of, we're forgetting the fact that we were just attacked we just attacked them in 1998. This is really retaliation. It's probable, that Bush just did a bad job in rhetoric, and the politicians did a real bad job of really explaining the human nature side of things. Maybe there's a bit of warmongering, a lot of greed going on. And again, these are usually just byproducts of warfare, right? There has to be arms dealers. There's a lot of people who make money off of warfare. But these are byproducts of the central axiom, and that is that, we have a belligerent country. They want the bomb. If they acquire the bomb, then they're going to shoot it into Israel and blow up all of Israel. Once they blow up Israel, then they're going to shoot it into Western Europe, and they're going to just, that's what they want to do. It's like, that's its purpose, and they're a group of people who are willing to use it. And then, as far as millennials, we're a lot more concerned about whether or not there's going to be a draft or not, or whether we're going to go to college, or join the military and go and fight for our country and fight against radical jihad, which is what they wanted, was a fight, and we gave it to them and we won, and we shouldn't feel guilty about that. Okay, we don't need winner's remorse. So many of the best of the population enlisted post-graduation as they grow up, and it left a vacuum, a cultural vacuum, educational vacuum, leadership vacuum. All of the best leaders who would have normally been leading businesses and companies and sports teams and things like that are now deployed to the Middle East. We have people who were in business leaders, leaving their businesses and going to fight against radical jihad. And a lot of times they came back and society had changed, right? It was a foreign society. Maybe we weren't quite mature enough to know what we were fighting for. Okay, fighting against the system of radical Islam. And these people do. This is part of their belief system, is to kill the Christian on Sunday and kill the Jew on Saturday. So, it's like a three-pointer. If you kill a Jew, it's like a two-pointer if you kill a Christian. And if you kill any other infidel, it's just 1 point. So that's what they believe, and they're willing to die for it, blow themselves up for. They would give themselves payouts to families who did, suicide bombings and things like that. And that's the sort of society we grew up in. But we may not have connected it very well to previous wars, probably because we had bad political leadership. But that's what I'm doing now, is I'm connecting it and putting it in its place in a historical timeline so that those with PTSD out there can understand what happened and can overcome any doubts or ambitions that you may have experienced in your life. 9/11 and the God of War. All right, so Hashem is the God of war. It says it many times in the Bible. Nobody goes to war without Hashem doing so. Maybe God heard the cries of the people that were suffering under the Iraq dictatorship. Maybe he heard the cries of the Afghans who were suffering under jihad, right? Under radical extremist Islam. And maybe we were angels, like literally sent to a salvation to the people there that were suffering. Okay, and that way of life was suffering. Maybe extreme Islam is bad. Okay, and then we were there to again to liberate, and not like a communistic way of the liberation front, but in the actual true way of the way that we did. So prior to the Israelites entering into Canaan, God had sent a famine, or had sent a plague ahead, and had wiped out like a huge portion of the Canaanites. But unfortunately, the Israelites got there and they only saw, what they saw, and they brought back a bad report. Meanwhile, God had just parted the Red Sea, destroyed Egypt, destroyed the entire Egyptian army, and then they won a war right after leaving Egypt. Yeah, they brought back a bad report, only to brought back a good report. Meanwhile, God is showing them where to go by a pillar of fire at night and clouds during the day. So he's obviously quite perturbed that this bad report comes back. But yet, it does stand to be true that God did go ahead. He said, often I'm sending my angel ahead, and cleared the way. Prior to the Puritans coming to Plymouth, it's interesting to note that Halley's Comet did appear in 1611, prior to the Puritans landing in Plymouth. And there was another comet, and I wrote about this comet before, but if you read the actual hard sources, the Native Americans knew that there was some sort of large change coming. It had just been the turn of the century, 1600, but they had seen a comet. And it was I forget which one, it wasn't Halley's Comet, but I wrote the paper on it. But they saw the comet, and then again, the plague came through and wiped out a big portion of the indigenous people in the Northeast. And this opened up the path for a pact to be made with Puritans and Chief Massasoit, so that it was a military contract where the Puritans would help them in their wars and protect them from the warring tribes, because not all Indian tribes are peaceful. You have a lot of belligerent Indian tribes in the U.S. So perhaps 9/11 was really a blessing in disguise. Okay, and again, this is reflecting on not only growing more mature, but also more research and stepping back and looking at things in the way of how God, his story, right, shapes nations and the world. Okay, this is just kind of the way he does it. Soldier, it's time to move forward. What happened, happened. Whether 9/11 was an inside operation, which we know the intel was leaked regarding the drill, we do the same thing. We want to collect intel from our enemies on the best time to attack, or not to. This is part of warfare. What we have failed at is connecting the fact that we were attacked in 1990, or that we attacked Baghdad in 1998, that we attacked them in Desert Storm. We forget that, or it hasn't been strung together cohesively enough, because people weren't millennials. The boomers, they obviously have, as you've seen in the video, they obviously are aware of the war, the continuing soft war that occurred. Whereas we, as millennials, may not have been so consciously aware of it. So what happened. We got hit, and we hit back. Okay? Oftentimes, God uses the devil, right? That's that was the devil's side, hit us, brought us to war. And we go to a funeral, and we accept death as being God's will. Isn't that what we say? person has gone to a better place. This person's with God. They're watching us now, even though that's not the case biblically. Biblically, they stay asleep until Judgment Day, but we're not going to get into that yet. But we accept, the dearly departed, that they were supposed to die. So, with 9/11, it's time for us to also accept that that was supposed to happen, and that we are battle hardened. Okay, this is what we are. This is who we are. We are the modern day warrior. Okay? And I know that some of you have experienced IEDs and different situations where you've lost friends and had your brothers die in your arms before. But we need to see this as a part of warfare, and that our leadership is needed today as we move forward, whether it's business or on the battlefield, social critics, musicians, athletes, coaches, teachers, whatever field you're in, business, banking, okay, society needs our leadership today. Okay, not to be introverted, to dwell on PTSD, but to get over it. Okay, to accept that that there is collateral damage in warfare. Okay, it's time for us to mature and get past that thing. And this lecture is about how conspiracy, a lot of it has really revolved around the whole 9/11 incident. And even I put together some of the biggest materials on the internet on this conspiracy. And I just want to say that there's a lot of questionable things. George Bush being part of the 322, Kerry 322, all these guys involved in this, but we need to understand that ultimately God is in control. And again, that whole thing could have been a blessing in disguise for a much larger purpose, a purpose like us as being these battle-hardened leaders that we are today. And something that, back 20 years ago, or 10, 15 years ago, we didn't see coming. In the last 10 years, a lot has changed. And now we're in a position of leadership where it's incumbent upon us to step up and to share why we're so annoyed by some of the activities and the leadership failures that we see around us, so that we can change those leadership failures now, today, moving forward. Because it's not a question of if, but when the next war is going to break out, World War III. And when that happens, and I have a feeling it could be very soon, we need to be there to lead in a way that we can have moral and ethical clearness. We can be guilt-free as we move forward, because where we're going to need to stay as guilt-free as possible, as long as we maintain our ethical warfare and what we've been taught about what's right and what's wrong. It is wrong to shoot a woman in the head for wearing a burqa. Communism is wrong. It concentrates the wealth in the few. It's just a totalitarian state. Different side of the same coin. We're going to talk about that one day, but that's the bottom line. Because today, the drums of war echo once again. I don't know what's coming, but I have a feeling, well, I do know, World War III is definitely coming. I'm here to warn you and to prepare you so that you're mentally and physically ready, and that we can go through this on the right foot. That's where we need to be. Sounds a little ironic, but peace.